Imagine that this happened to you, that your child cut off their relationship with you, with their mother or father. I don't know if this might have happened to you or perhaps to one of your friends or acquaintances, but believe me, there are a lot of such cases. It's one of the most talked about topics, and yet the most misunderstood when it comes to the decisions of adult children. If you have surfed the internet, you could find two completely different opinions. One side claiming that leaving the parents is an act of children who want to set out on their own and having finally gathered the courage to leave their parents' nest, while the other side says that it's selfish, cruel, and a symptom of a poisoned generation taught to pathologize normal family friction. I want us to talk about what psychology and research actually say, because I think both sides miss a lot of nuance. Today, we will deal with why adult children cut contact with their parents, what research tells us about family estrangement, who usually initiates it, how parents and children experience it differently, and whether it is a painful process that parents and children need to overcome, or perhaps something much deeper. First, let's define what we are talking about. Cutting contact, which is often called family estrangement in the literature, COT refers to a conscious decision to end or drastically limit communication with a poor or family member. It is most often initiated by the adult child, not the parent. Do you agree with me? This can look like completely blocking a parent on all channels, or it can be more gradual. Fewer visits, limited communication. But the key feature is that the adult child makes a conscious, intentional decision to distance themselves from their parents. How common is this? Do you think this only happened to you, that you are now going through a difficult situation that no one else has experienced? Believe me, this is more common than most would assume. Research by the University of Cambridge, led by Dr. Lucy Blake, showed that about 27% of families in the U.S. are affected by estrangement. That's more than 1 in 4 families. In the UK, the numbers are similar. A study by Carl Pillemer at Cornell University, which included over 1,300 Americans, found that approximately 27% of respondents stated they were estranged from a family member, and a significant part of those cases related to the parent-child relationship. So this is not a fringe phenomenon. This is not something that happens only in a small number of extremely dysfunctional families. This is widespread not only in America, Great Britain, Canada, and Australia, but across the entire planet Earth. And believe me, what that family goes through is a public taboo topic that is not talked about, which means that most people who go through it do so in silence, without much support, and often with a lot of shame. Do you agree with me? And what do you think about it? Here is one of the most important research findings that directly challenges a common cultural assumption: adult children and parents experience separating from each other in various ways. This research by Dr. Christina Sharp at the University of Washington might be painful for you, but what was analyzed regarding the estrangement of adult children from parents are the most common reasons for cutting contact: toxic or abusive behavior, feeling unspoiled or unloved, feeling controlled, lack of acceptance, especially regarding identity, relationships, or life choices, and a long-standing pattern of poor communication that never improved, despite attempts to work on it. Critically, most adult children do not cut contact impulsively. Research consistently shows that estrangement is almost always a last resort reached after years, sometimes decades, of trying to make the relationship work. Typically, there is a long history of reconciliation attempts, boundary setting, confrontations, and numerous attempts to repair the relationship that failed before the child made the decision to completely withdraw. This is important to understand because parents often perceive cutting contact as an abrupt decision by someone who could not handle a normal family dynamic. But the Dorada does not support that. Dr. Sharp describes that decision as a process, not an event. A process involving enormous grief, guilt, and ambivalence before and after the choice is made. Listen to this, because this research gets really interesting. Parents tell a completely different story. Studies that examined both sides revealed that the two parties almost never agree on the cause. Parents tend to attribute the estrangement to external influences, a partner who drove a wedge between them, a therapist who encouraged the child to label them as villains, the toxic family, culture on social media, or the child's own mental health struggles. In short, everyone else is to blame. They often describe themselves as blindsided, claiming they had no idea anything was wrong, or they see themselves as victims of a child who is simply oversensitive or ungrateful for what they did for them. In contrast, adult children describe in detail a long history of problematic behavior that they tried to point out many times before cutting contact. This difference is not just a matter of someone lying. This is about a deep human psychological phenomenon. Parents, like most people, are subject to self-serving bias, the tendency to interpret ambiguous information in a way that portrays them in a good light. It is truly difficult for most people to accept the idea that they might have been harmful to someone they love, whether they were aware of it or not. Therefore, it often happens that parents are not even aware of what their child was going through when they had arguments with them, or they didn't even want to listen to their child and hear their opinion. This is not specific only to the parent-child relationship. We see this dynamic in toxic partner relationships, workplace conflicts, and friendships that fall apart. The person causing harm almost never sees themselves as the source of harm to the same extent as the person enduring that harm. What are those specific behaviors that push your child to this point, forcing them to leave you? Dr. Sharp's research identified several recurring themes: emotional abuse, chronic criticism, contempt, humiliation, emotional invalidation, not wanting to hear their child's opinion was among the most frequently cited. Physical abuse in childhood that was never acknowledged or resolved was another major factor. Parentification, where the child was forced to assume an inappropriate role as a caretaker, appeared again. Addiction and the accompanying chaos and neglect were also common. Yet, one of the most consistent factors was the Palmer's failure to acknowledge or apologize for the harm caused in the past. The adult child did not necessarily demand that the parent be perfect. Often, they simply sought an acknowledgement of the truth. When that acknowledgement never arrived, the relationship became untenable. What rarely appeared as a primary cause? Minor disagreements over lifestyle, politics, or child rearing. When adult children say that cutting contact was the right decision, even when they describe it as necessary for their survival, the psychological cost is almost universally described as significant. Let's be clear. Grief is omnipresent on both sides. Most estranged children grieve the relationship they wish they had, not just the one they actually had. There is grief for a fantasy, for the kind of parent they wish they had, for a childhood that could have been different, and for a future relationship that will now never happen. There is also enormous ambivalence. These children often question their decision. They wonder if they were too harsh or if the parent might have changed. During major life events, weddings, the birth of children, illnesses, deaths, estrangement becomes acutely painful in a new way. The absence of a parent in those moments is a special source of grief for both sides. And then there is guilt. Even those who intellectually stand fully behind their decision often carry a persistent, gnawing guilt, sometimes because they were directly told that what they are doing is wrong, and sometimes because society sends that message in 1,000 subtle ways. The expectation that family bonds are unconditional and that breaking them is a moral failure is deeply embedded in most cultures. That's why it's not true to say that cutting contact is the easier path or a sign of avoiding emotional difficulties. In many cases, it is one of the most emotionally demanding things a person can do. This is the question people want the answer to the most. Does cutting contact actually improve mental health for both sides? Research here is nuanced, but it generally supports the idea that in cases of actual abuse or chronic toxicity, estrangement can be associated with better mental health outcomes. Dr. Sharp's qualitative research revealed that many adult children reported a reduction in anxiety and depression and a better sense of self after cutting contact between them and their parents. They described feeling safer, feeling more like themselves, and having more capacity for healthy relationships once the draining or harmful relationship with the parent was removed. However, research also clearly states that the process of estrangement is rarely clean or linear. Many describe a cycle of relief, then grief, then guilt, then tentative attempts at reconnecting, and then re-estrangement. What seems crucial is a support system. People who have partners, close friends, therapists, or communities that validate their experience fare significantly better than those who go through it in isolation or under pressure from their environment to reconcile. Here is something that is not talked about enough. Many estrangements do not last forever. Research suggests that a significant portion of estranged family members eventually reconnect and reconcile, at least partially. But the conditions and the nature of that reconnected relationship usually look different from the original relationship between the children and parents. What most adult children say they need for reconciliation is acknowledging the parent's mistake made toward them, real accountability and evidence, not just promises that things will be different. So, not perfection, but acknowledging the truth. Reconciliation usually fails when the parent responds with tactics that further erode trust, guilt tripping through other family members, denying the child's experience involving third parties or playing the victim without any attempt to understand the child's perspective. Often in these families, there is a third-party dynamic, the other parent, a sibling, an aunt, or an uncle, someone who is more focused on preserving the apparent peace and surface harmony than on solving the real problem. Those family members, however, well-intentioned, often function as enablers. They pressure the estranged child to reconcile and make excuses for the problematic parent. By doing so, they actually protect the harmful person from the natural consequences of their behavior, which is the loss of the relationship with the child. As I said before, enabling does not protect the person being indulged. It deprives them of the feedback they need to change. Sincere love sometimes means letting someone feel the full weight of the consequences of their actions. To summarize, family estrangement is much more common than we think. It is almost always initiated by the children as a last resort after years of failed attempts to talk to their parents. The causes are usually serious abuse, chronic emotional damage, failure to acknowledge the truth, and not some banal things. Parents and children rarely agree on the causes, which reflects how difficult it is for all of us to see ourselves as a source of pain to those we love. Cutting contact carries a high emotional price, but in certain cases, it brings significant improvement to well-being. Reconciliation is possible, but it requires taking responsibility, not pressure and denial. If you are an adult child going through this, know that your experience is valid, that the grief is real, and it doesn't mean you made a mistake. If you are a parent from whom a child has become estranged, know that the path to reconnection does not lead through pressure and shifting blame onto others, but through a sincere openness to hear your child's experience without the need to defend yourself. And if you are a bystander, a family member caught in the crossfire, resist the urge to fix things by managing someone else's behavior. Sometimes the noblest thing you can do is to stay out of it and let the two people directly involved find their own way. Dear connections, this primarily refers to parents. Listen to your children, respect their opinions and decisions, support your children, listen, and they will have a lot to tell you. This also applies to children. Do not immediately criticize your parents. Do not think you lack support on their part. They are simply more experienced than you and want to advise you and guide you on the right path. Dear connections, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please write me your opinion on the relationships between parents and children. Follow our channel. I wish you a beautiful and sunny day. See you.